And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome today TV writer turned debut author Joey Hartstone here to give us the inside scoop on his brand new red hot book, The Local. Joey, welcome to Mystery and Thrilling Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thank you so much for having me. So this book is about an intellectual property lawyer in East Texas who tries a lot of patent cases because it's sort of the hub of patent law in the United States. And then he inadvertently gets embroiled in a murder trial and has to take on his first murder case.
Ooh, well, I can't wait to get the inside scoop because intellectual property lawyer does not scream sexy courtroom drama. And yet that's exactly what Woody Harrelson, the actor, has said this book is. So we got a lot to discuss and I can't wait to get into every single delicious detail. First, I just want to welcome everyone. So we are broadcasting live to 6 different destinations as always. So no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. You know, it's Mystery Monday because Mondays can be murder. And that means I'm going to give you my hand-picked featured authors and you get to ask them anything. So ask Joey about writing LBJ, about writing 2 seasons of The Good Fight, about wanting to be a lawyer, but writing about lawyers instead. The crazy praise this book is racking up, the murder case, all the questions. Let's get into it. So, Joey, let's kick off first with those words of praise from Mr. Harrelson, Woody Harrelson himself, calling this a sexy courtroom drama. How do you write? What do you think the key to writing a sexy courtroom drama is?
I'm not sure what made Woody say that was sexy, but I like the adjective. There's a little bit of sex in the drama, but yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Okay, let's start with the difference between writing for TV and writing for this book. Do you think that your script writing for both feature films and TV shows helped you? Did it hinder you? How did it impact the writing of this book? If it did.
Yeah, it definitely helped a lot. Working on television shows, you break a lot of story. That's sort of the main component of the job. So having to break this story was something I kind of relied on my training in television on shows like The Good Fight and Your Honor. And yeah, I mean, I wrote this in the first person because writing it that way felt like I was sort of writing a long soliloquy. So even though it's prose, it felt more like dialogue to me, which I'm more comfortable in than prose.
And tell us what you mean breaking the story.
Yeah, so like on The Good Fight, which is a show that I worked on for 2 seasons, there's at least one case every episode. So you're in a room with 8 or 10 other writers, and the first thing you do is you start talking about, well, what's the case going to be this week? And then you just start plotting on whiteboards what the moves are going to be. Who's the client? What does one side argue? How does the other one counter argue? What are the information that they find? What are the twists and turns? And so I just sort of did that on my own whiteboards all by myself to craft the story for The Local.
So you did write it on whiteboard. So, well, let's back it up. You're a plotter, clearly, not a pantser. So how long did it take you? Did you write it all on whiteboards? Then did you put it in, like, walk us through the process. How long did it take? What did it look like? Was there a lot of sobbing involved?
Not too much sobbing. A friend of mine named Nathan Speed, who's an intellectual property lawyer, told me about East Texas and this town of Marshall, and that it was, like I said, this hub of patent litigation. And so that was probably in 2017 or so. So I kind of kicked around this idea, kind of kept it on the back burner for a few years. And then when I finally had the time to really dive in, I knew I was going to do it. And so, yeah, I did it on I do whiteboards to sort of get the big picture. And then I do a very thorough outline. I usually spend more time on my outline than on my first draft. And I usually know pretty much where I'm going so that I don't stare at a blank screen and panic at any time.
How did you go from, well, first of all, learning about this small unknown town in the EDTX, the Eastern District of Texas, which you found out from your friend was a hotbed of intellectual property litigation activity. Crazy but true. And they are the founders of the so-called Rocket Docket because they're speeding through the cases to coming up with this idea about a murder where an IP litigator who usually confines himself to duking it out about ideas is now duking it out about who done it.
Yeah, well, I found this whole intellectual property law to be really, really interesting, and it made me want to research for a couple of years. But the more I tried to break a story about a patent infringement case, the more I decided I could not sustain an entire novel based on an intellectual property case. So no disrespect to intellectual property lawyers like your husband, but I was having a little bit of difficulty. And I thought, you know what, if I kill somebody in this story, it's going to become immediately more interesting. And then I get the benefit of having this character who's not a criminal defense attorney have to go into a world that he's unfamiliar with.
Okay. Now, how long did it actually take, soup to nuts, start to finish, from the conversation with Mr. Speed, ironically talking about the speedy the speedy Texas lawsuits? So Mr. Speed himself told you about Marshall, Texas, to you holding this book in your hands. Walk us through.
Probably 3 or 4 years. I mean, I'd say for 2 years I just sat on this while I did other things, but I kept just sort of toying with it in my head. And then when I decided I really wanted to break this story and then write it, I would say that from starting that process until the first draft, it was probably 9 months or so.
Ooh, okay, cool. I thought I lost your audio there for a second. Now, Joey, when was it hard? When you first then said, I want to write a book, were people like, LOL, go back to LA, TV boy? Or were they like, welcome, come on in, here's a book deal?
I avoided that problem by not telling a lot of people that I wanted to write a book. I thought, let me write it first and then look at it and see if it's embarrassing, in which case no one has to know that I did it. But no, I shared it with my wife, Abby, first and foremost, as I share everything. And she liked it. And she said, I have a friend I know named Rachel Dillon Freed, who's a literary agent. And she said, can I share it with her? And I thought, okay, well, we'll see what she thinks, because she's a professional, and she liked it too. And so everybody who read it early on was really kind and complimentary, and it just kind of went from there.
Yay. What have you learned from writing this book? Are you going to, did you love it? Are you going to write more books? Are you going to go back to TV? Are you going to try to do both? Are you going to turn this into a script? What's next for Joey Hartstone?
Yeah, I would love to do all of that. I definitely am still a television writer. I'm working on the second season of Your Honor on Showtime right now, but I would love to keep writing books. It was a really nice change of pace. It was fun to get to write a story that I really wanted to tell, and that was more personal, and then that was sort of unfiltered. And then, yes, I would absolutely love to adapt this into a TV show at some point. I originally conceived it as a TV show, and then the more I got into it, the more I worried that what can often happen in TV is you pitch a series and maybe you get to write a pilot, but it usually doesn't go from there. And I had this whole story that I wanted to tell, and I was afraid that if I did it that route, I'd never get to the end. So I thought, if I write a book, at least I'll get to tell the whole thing.
Ooh, interesting. So I'm a super visual person. I'm wondering if everyone in the audience is like me. I just was hearing from one reader who said she's not. She said she just reads the words on the page and that's all they are to her. But as I'm reading, I'm imagining. So and I think because you write very visually and very evocatively and very descriptively, it was really easy for me to picture Lisa the Leg. I love Lisa the Leg Miller. Your blonde and pink tipped hair, sort of partner in crime to Jimmy Euchre, and all of these other people. Like I could see them, I could imagine them. I could picture the courthouse and the hand-laid brick parking lot. Did you go to Marshall and nose around?
I did, yeah. It's a cool little town, and it is a beautiful, beautiful central location where there are 3 courthouses. There's this newer building, which is actually not that new. It's like 30 or 40 years old, but it looks like a government building. There's this Eastern District of Texas federal courthouse, which is so important in federal courthouses, and yet it sort of looks like a post office. It's very kind of nondescript. And then there's this Old County courthouse, which just looks like a Capitol building, and like a lot of ones in Texas, it's like the city hall, basically. It's beautiful. And so I knew I wanted to set something there and go from one courthouse to the next. And yeah, writing the visuals was actually a little bit different from writing scripts, because you can often, that's not the final product. So you just sort of write a little indication of what you think something looks like, but it's up to the director, and it's up to location scouting and all other things that are going to sort of paint that picture. But here, the words are all. So that was a little bit more challenging to have to paint the entire picture and know that it was just going to be kind of omitted.
But also with writing a book, you can do a lot more of the character's internal monologue or thoughts or meanderings in a way that you can't on TV. Was there any other big surprises for you or challenges? Was it hard for your brain to switch gears, or any other big differences you noticed?
That was probably the most fun, was being able to be inside this character's head. I think that's when people attempt screenwriting for the first time, that's usually one of the big mistakes, is they write things that are happening inside the character that you can't convey on screen. So to be able to actually just dive completely into his mind and anything he thought, to be able to say that was the most fun.
What was the least fun?
I don't want to say least fun, but editing I found to be really challenging because it was such a longer project to work on. I'm so used to having a television script or a screenplay where you can read it in one sitting. You can read it every single day when you're editing, and here having to try to like pick a couple chapters and try to remember what happened in the other 270 pages while you're editing, that was much more challenging.
Yeah, so editing is also my least favorite and most challenging part. I feel you on that. Nathaniel, welcome to the conversation. He says, as an attorney, I'm always curious why folks choose to focus on legal thrillers as opposed to other aspects of the thriller genre. Can you share what drew you to writing legal thrillers? Great question, Nathaniel.
Yeah, I love the law. So I would rather write legal dramas than other types of thrillers. I love attorneys. I wish I was one. I wish I had gone to law school. And so legal cases just interest me. So, I mean, what interested me about this story wasn't even a thriller to begin with. It was simply learning about patent law in this town I'd never heard of. And I think writing about things that interest you is usually a good idea, because if you're passionate about it and you want to keep researching something, usually there's something there that you can make intriguing for other people.
What is it that you love? Let's go a little deeper. What do you love about the law? What made you want to be a lawyer and now write about lawyers, even down to the not so sexy intellectual property lawyers? And I say that as someone who's married to one with great respect.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. My father went to law school. He was a lawyer. My aunt, my uncle, I have a lot of lawyers in the family and a lot of lawyers who are friends. And then, to go back to Nathaniel's question, I think people like writing about the law because there's inherent stakes. There's inherent stakes. There's scoreboards. There's winners and losers. There's competition, and there's conflict always. And so it sort of has all the nice recipes for drama.
That's a really good point. One of the many, I have to just tell everyone who's watching, I'm really loving this book. I don't love all of the books that I interview, but I try to provide something for everyone, because everyone strangely does not have the exact same taste as me. I know, it's really weird. But Nathaniel's saying, great answer. Thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you for the great question and for joining in. What I am loving about this book, aside from everything, is that it's, first of all, how thoughtfully and intentionally the prose is crafted. So I love a good twist. I love a good whodunit. I'm a Nancy Drew girl. Like, I've always been a mystery lover, but I also love beautifully rendered paragraphs and sentences and thoughtfully crafted prose. This has that for me. Number two, it has heart, and I love that. Number three, I'm learning something. I like learning about the history of Marshall and the rocket docket and the EDTEX, the Eastern District of Texas, and how that came to be. This little tiny town came to be this huge intellectual property center in the country. Very bizarre. But also, I like how Jimmy, Mr. Euchre, our lead protagonist, he says that his job when he gets up there is to make people feel. And so intellectual property is really complex and kind of boring, to be honest. I'm not a legal lover, clearly, but he hones in on these primal feelings that we all have. We've all had something wrong happen to us. And he says, someone hits your car and doesn't leave a note, or someone takes something from you, or, takes credit for your work or whatever. And you get angry about that. And he taps into these primal emotions for people who aren't, fluent in boring IP law. And I love that he hones in on that. You said that you're from a small town, and what you love about this is the small town part. And you open the book with the beautiful line that small towns all hold secrets. Let's talk about your ties to small towns. What do you love about them? Why'd you want to write about it? Why Marshall?
Yeah, well, it felt more manageable. I mean, if you have to write about a big city, you still have to pick a small community. But yeah, going to Marshall, when I went there, I just had this, everyone was really nice, and people were willing to talk to me, but it felt like especially the lawyers did not want to talk about what they did. And you could just sense this idea that when outsiders come here, They want to write about things that they don't want, that the people here don't want to share. And the lawyers here have a good thing going, and there can be criticism from outsiders. And so there's just no need for them to open themselves up to that. So I think as I spoke to more and more people, I think they started to get a sense that my angle and my interest was sort of genuine. And that I wanted to capture this place honestly, and that it wasn't to be an outsider and to be critical. It was to try to get a sense of how they felt about their own town. I mean, you said it had heart. Like, I do have a sort of romantic attitude about my writing. And so even if I had criticisms of this place, I wanted to tell it through a character who loved what he did and loved where he was from, even if he was critical of it. Because people who are passionate about what they do, they make for interesting characters.
You talk about the big city lawyers who blow into town to get their cases on the rocket docket and try to blend and I'm flashing back to my cousin Vinny, Marissa Tomei. Oh yeah, you blend by putting on a pair of cowboy boots and then walking their blistered feet into the courtroom, and everyone earning a big fat eye roll from everyone in the audience and on the jury, and nobody likes that because they're not putting the time in. So did you invest in a pair of cowboy boots?
I did go to a place that sold cowboy boots, and I couldn't even get my feet into the boot. So I don't know if I have a high arch or low arch or what that is. I couldn't get my foot into one that fit me. So no, I do not have any. But no, that was sort of what really intrigued me. That was the second component that made me want to write this book. When I was talking to my buddy Nathan, was he had told me all about Marshall, and I thought, well, this place sounds really cool. But then he told me about the local council that worked there, and that this idea that these major corporations from all over the world get sued in East Texas, and they have teams of high-powered attorneys from all the major cities, but that is not enough to connect to the 8 people who are on these local juries. And that the more and more cases were here, the more they realized that having a local counsel from this part of Texas who could talk to their neighbors, essentially, that was an essential component to being victorious. And so I thought, well, that's a character I want to write about. It is a person who can get up there and doesn't even necessarily have to be an expert in intellectual property law, but they're an expert in where they're from and how to talk to their people and to do it authentically. And that matters.
As Jimmy Euchre says, they are me and I am them. He says to get his new client on board, who then uses that line against him to make him represent him for murder, just turning that right back around.
Yes.
So Michelle King, co-creator of The Good Wife, The Good Fight, and Evil, raves, this is a spectacular courtroom thriller that kept me turning pages like the best of Grisham and Turrow. What do you think is the key to keeping people turning those pages, Joey?
I think, Michelle King and her husband Robert are 2 of my mentors, and they have a lot of little rules that they use on The Good Wife and The Good Fight, and they're helpful. One of them is go for A and get B. So have a character go into a scene wanting one thing and have them come out with something else, and every new something else leads you to want to go to the next page or the next chapter and figure out what's going to happen.
The way you said one thing, I was waiting for the next things, but then you just
sorry. No, and then I just halted right there for you. I'm sorry.
So is that one of the techniques you're demonstrating in real time?
No, that would be the opposite of that technique. It's just pure silence. I didn't continue with the story, but
I leaned in, so it worked.
Yes.
So I'm intrigued. Okay, go in. I've never heard that before. Go in for A and come out with B. So is that, and so would an example of that be Jimmy goes in to represent, to be the local counsel for his client as an intellectual property case, but he comes out having to represent him for murder?
Yeah. Or your character gets a clue, and so you go to this place where you think you're going to find the murder weapon, and if you go into it thinking you're going to find the murder weapon, it sort of ends the story if you then do in fact find the murder weapon. But so you don't want to find that, but you don't want to kill the story either. So you should find some other clue that's going to turn the story in a new direction. And Robert and Michelle King are masters at constantly tweaking their story and moving their story back and forth into new directions. And that's a good way to always keep your audience.
Oh, interesting. I had not heard that tip. I love it. Another rave review from William Landay, author of the New York Times bestseller Defending Jacob, raving a sizzling, fast-paced read that drew me in and kept me turning the pages right to the end. Joey Hartstone paints a vivid picture of a small-town Texas court where old feuds and allegiances mean anything can happen. What do you think is the key to to being fast paced? You, in terms of keeping the pages turning, I understand going in for A and coming out with B, but why are some books slow reads and some books are fast?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I rely on my TV writing background a little bit, but you always want conflict in the scene, and so I think every single scene, it was like, what does Jimmy want out of this scene, and who is going to be the impediment to him getting what he wants, and to sometimes make him successful, sometimes he is unsuccessful, and then sometimes something surprising happens.
I love that. Now, Joey, as a plotter on your whiteboards, did you know from go? Did you go in for A and come out with A in terms of where you thought this book was going to go, or were you creatively guided in any other way that kind of surprised you?
I pretty much knew where I was going to go. When I realized this was going to be a murder mystery, I just asked myself who got killed and then who killed him. And I wanted to have only a few suspects, and I wanted them to all be plausible and to be able to toggle back and forth between the 3 or 4 people it could be. I watched a lot of legal thrillers that some I love, some I wasn't too taken by, and what I wanted to do was avoid some of the pitfalls that I thought make for a lesser story. And usually, I think the end of a legal thriller can kind of make or break what the story is. And I think that what you have to do is give your audience or your readers a chance to get it right. And if it's one of those stories where the killer came out of nowhere and you couldn't possibly have seen it coming, you sort of deny them that chance to play detective that I think is so fun when you are reading a legal thriller.
I totally agree. But one thing that I've always sort of been fascinated by, and I ask a lot of my guests, is you want to play fair, because everyone gets pissed off if you got to the end of the book and you're like, you feel the killer came out of nowhere. On the other hand, you don't want them to guess it on page 2, because that makes them mad too. And we're talking to people who read a lot of mysteries, and they're good at this.
Yeah,
we're all amateur detectives. We're murderinos. We want to figure it out.
Yeah.
How did you balance that?
Well, it's good that there are so many different types of storytellers. So the killers, I'm thinking of shows. I won't give any spoilers, but there are killer. There are stories where you think it's the husband in episode 1, and by the end of the series, it is the husband, and that's great. And then there's sometimes where the person comes out of nowhere, and then there's sometimes where you think you have it, and then it twists a little bit, or it's someone else close by. And I think because there's so many different stories, the nice thing is, at least on your first book, nobody knows which kind of storyteller you are, so you have the benefit of all those options out there. And then I guess probably the trick, if you're fortunate enough to write more books, is to start doing it a little bit differently, so people don't figure out your formula.
So are you planning to make this a series, Joey? Is Uke coming back?
I hope so. I would love to. I've already got a couple more ideas for what the next installments could be, and I love these characters, so I would absolutely like to write a couple more books set in Marshall.
Yay! I can see this being a good series, and he's got some good cohorts and partners in crime that are a nice supporting cast of characters as well. Nathaniel has a good question. Do you have a favorite legal thriller? Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, I would probably say the Lincoln Lawyer series. I read that whole series about a year before I wrote this book, and I thought he was such a cool character, a defense lawyer that it was sort of a tried and true defense attorney with just enough of a twist and hook to get you invested. And I think Connolly does just a brilliant job of always setting up interesting cases, and he does one thing that I really love about legal thrillers, which is there's always a fulfilling conclusion in the courtroom. Even if there's something that happens after the fact. I really don't like following a lawyer for 300 pages only to not see lawyering be a component to the conclusion of the story. And so there was just a lot of things in the Lincoln Lawyer series that I wanted to emulate when I was writing this.
Or I just was at Thriller Fest, and Alifair Burke, who is also a lawyer and an amazing writer, was saying that one of the reasons that she wanted to first become a lawyer and then write about lawyers is because she didn't like that sometimes legal lawyers will be limited to "I object, Your Honor," or leading. That there's like these 3 key phrases, and lawyers can be a deeper character than just those key phrases, which I thought was really smart. And I really liked that in her keynote with Lisa Unger.
I always wonder the first time a lawyer objects, do they just feel like I finally made it? This is why I went to 3 years of law school, because I could finally say objection, Your Honor.
Oh my God, I would literally, I would object to everything, even myself,
Yeah,
just for the
yeah.
chance to say that. How did you feel the Lincoln Lawyer adaptation to Netflix was? Were you happy with it? Not happy with it?
I haven't watched it yet. I was actually up for a job on that show, and that's what made me read the series. And honestly, I wouldn't have written this book if not for that opportunity, which unfortunately didn't come to fruition, but maybe fortunately didn't. But I'm going to watch it when I'm done working on the show that I'm on right now. But it's one of those that I'm saving because I don't want to watch it when I'm distracted. I hear it's fantastic, and I'm sure it is. I love the movie. I love the book, so I'm sure they knocked that TV show out of the park.
Yeah, and our favorite mystery reviewer, Eileen Cogdill, who writes for Publishers Weekly, Shelf Awareness, The Sun Sentinel, and many other places. She's also a judge for the LA Times Book Prize. She was just on right before you, and she says Connolly is there's no one better at police procedurals.
Yeah, I love the Bosch series.
Great. Yeah, exactly. And she raved about Bosch. Publishers Weekly called you impressive, Joey, saying the surprising twists are rendered plausible by Hartstone's mastery of conveying detailed trial strategies. Scott Turow, a reader should take a look. To have your mastery called out here on your first debut. Wow, that must have been a great day.
I can't believe how nice the reviews have been. It's been so flattering. They keep referencing Grisham and Turow, who are people that I would love to be mentioned in the same sentence with for the rest of my life. I reread Presumed Innocent when I was writing this book. I went back and read a bunch of sort of the early stories from the authors that I love. And so, yeah, it's really flattering.
Yay. All right, everybody, we have 3 minutes left. So if anyone has any last questions, let me know. I also do allow people to submit questions in advance in my private Facebook group, Mystery and Thriller Maven. So we have a few of those to get as well. And we probably won't have time to get to all of them, but I am cutting and pasting all of Joey's amazing reviews into the comments so that you can peruse those at your leisure. The big thrill raved that in the local Joey Hartstone shows us that everything else, the thrills and the dangers, are bigger in Texas. I did love that one. Joey, Miranda submitted a question in advance, and she would like to know what your best advice is for aspiring writers.
I would say write about things that you actually love, because it's far easier than writing about things that you can't stand or that you're not really interested in, and trying to write about things that you think other people will be interested in is sort of a fool's errand, because we can't really read other people's minds, and we're often chasing trends, and I have done it many times. Does not work. But when something genuinely interests you, you'll probably write about it with the enthusiasm that makes other people want to read about it.
And I saw that in this book, you love the law and you love small towns, that you're from a small town. So you wanted to really get in those two aspects. What else do you love that you will be bringing in to your future works, Joey?
For the future installments of this book, I would, I'm really curious about these characters, and I'm curious how people, the stories sort of, I think is kind of the top thing that people talk about, but I'm really curious to see how people respond to the characters. I want to bring them all back. I want to see where their relationships go. I want to see what happens to them in different phases of their lives.
Okay, great. Anna said she can't be here tonight because she has to work, but she can't wait to watch the replay later. And she would like to know if you got to be involved in the cover and the title, or if they gave them to you.
Yeah.
So let's look at this cool cover and title.
Yes. For the cover, I was involved in so much as Michael Windsor at Doubleday created it. And I said, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm not particularly artistic. And so I was just floored by how beautiful it is. And it captured all the essential components of the story. And I just thought it was great. And the title, yeah, so that's what they call the local counsel. That's what the job is that my main character does. So I love the title. I usually, as a film writer, I try not to get married to titles, because you rarely are in charge of whether or not a movie or a TV show is called what you want to call it. And then I did like the local, and I was worried that they were going to make me change it. But fortunately, that was never a conversation. So it just stuck.
So this was your title the whole time?
It was. Yeah.
Very cool. Anna and Miranda, you get a shout out. So thank you for submitting your questions in advance. I also love it because you'll see when you read it that there is a very prominent story that Jimmy Euchre likes to tell about his red Rangoon red Rangoon Ford F-100. I think I'm saying that right. Pickup truck. His first car that he bought from the widow next door for $2,400, and he really uses that as a way to connect with the local people, his fellow townspeople, about in a heartfelt way, about things being taken from you, and how wrong that feels, and creating some sort of justice out of it. Oh my gosh! So Joey, the book isn't even out yet. How are you feeling?
I'm excited. We have about 8 hours, so it'll be out very shortly.
It's too late to do anything if you want to take it back, and it's too late if you want to change
That's right.
anything. It's done.
Yes.
How will you be celebrating tonight?
I will probably be asleep by midnight when it comes out, to be honest with you. But I will get up very early and I will start see if all of my editions have arrived, and yeah, I'll be looking online to see if anyone started reading the book.
So exactly, then you wait and you hit refresh,
Yes.
and you text everyone to read faster.
Yes.
So the book is out tomorrow, y'all, which means it is time to grab your copy of it tonight. Pre-order it tonight, and the good folks at Murder Right by the Book will send it out to you tomorrow. So I'm going to pop the link in your comments. So no matter where you're watching from, Facebook, YouTube, private Facebook groups, here it is. Click and order, so that you too can immerse yourself in the world of the local in Marshall, Texas, with Mr. Hartstone. The sexy courtroom drama, so says Woody Harrelson, and I have to agree. You're gonna love Jimmy Euchre as much as I do. Thoroughly enjoying this, and then all the good tea is spilled, as the cool kids say, in the Facebook group after the event. So after you read the book, if you want a place to dish all the details, and I know I do, hop over to Mystery and Thriller Mavens, free and open to all. We do a ton of giveaways. We have a lot of fun, and we just nerd out about all things mysteries and thrillers. So here's the link to that as well. Come join us. And y'all, that's a wrap on Mystery Monday. I hope your Monday hasn't been too murderous, or has it? I will see you next week. Joey Hartstone, thank you for joining us live from LA, giving us the scoop on the local. Keep us posted. And when the local book 2 comes out, you got to come back and tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely will. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, everybody. I'll see you next week. Have a great night.